So prior to the arrival of the sugarcane aphid, a lot of people went ahead and left sorghum out in the field till we got a hard freeze. You could harvest before that, but it was convenient to leave it out there. But when the sugarcane aphid arrived and caused all that lodging, it became necessary to get the crop out of the field sooner, as soon as possible at maturity. But that ran into a problem because there are sugarcane aphids present in the field on the plants, and they could move up into the head and excrete honeydew and jam up the combines.
And one of the other situations that we have is that if you're planting late, then it's going to take longer into the later part of September and October before the grain becomes harvestable. And this last year we had sugarcane aphids that were out there for a long period of time because we had a real warm fall period, and so we had those sugarcane aphids there. So we looked at a trial where we compared looking at defol, which is sodium chlorate, and glyphosate, which is Roundup, as whether or not you could dry down that plant and be able to get in there and harvest. And the other thing was to look at malathion and a low rate of Savanto to see whether or not you could knock out the sugarcane aphids up in that head and be able to get in there and harvest. What we do know with malathion, it only provides about 50% control, and the residual activity is not very good. But with this particular test and this slide that you're looking at now, as you can see, at 4 days after application, defol, sodium chlorate, we had a knockdown of the sugarcane aphid at 4 days, 6 days, and 11 days. So why would you think that we had a knockdown with the sugarcane aphids? Where it turns out is that sodium chlorate dries up those leaves, desiccate those leaves, and the sugarcane aphids don't have the green leaf tissue to be feeding on, so it reduces their populations. But they're still feeding on those leaves where you don't get good control over all those leaves. We were able to get a reduction up in the upper part of that plant. Now, if you look at the Roundup, glyphosate, it's not really changing that leaf structure so much, and so you don't reduce the sugarcane aphid populations like it did with the sodium chlorate. But one thing I did notice is that the Roundup causes those sugarcane aphids to spread out all over the leaves, and they're not really clumped up. Now, when you look at malathion, we did get a reduction of the sugarcane aphid, and we see that at the 4 days after application, but then after that, the sugarcane aphids built back up. With the Savanto, we were able to get a reduction of the sugarcane aphids at this lower rate all the way out to 11 days after treatment. So then also, I couldn't really count the number of aphids up in the head, so I took a rating scale. And the rating scale is 1 to 5, and so the lower the rating means that you don't have very many sugarcane aphids up in the head. And so what you see with this is that with the untreated and the defol and Roundup, then you have an increase of the sugarcane aphids up in that head. Now, looking at malathion, the other bar is the Savanto. We did get a little bit reduction of the sugarcane aphids up in that head.
So the moral of the story seems to be, if you have aphids in significant numbers just prior to harvest, both malathion and Savanto have a 7-day pre-harvest interval. You need to go ahead and put one of those two products out in order to avoid sticky harvest.
Yes, probably so. And don't just rely on the herbicides to be able to reduce and be able to prevent that. This is another slide on looking at the honeydew, and I go by and did a similar rating about the honeydew, and the sugarcane aphids were up in that head, but that head was dried down to the top to the bottom of it. 3/4 of it was up above was dry. The stem part in the lower quarter was where you could find the sugarcane aphids. And generally, for this particular test, we didn't have really heavy honeydew up in the head, but when you start crushing those aphids that's up in the lower part of that head, then that's when it got sticky. So what we need to do is try to get the sugarcane aphids out of that head so that we don't have problems when we're harvesting.